بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب لله من سيئات أعمالنا ومن شرور أنفسنا. اللهم يا هاد اللهم رب السماوات والأرض ورب العرش العظيم ربنا ورب كل شيء أعوذ بك من شر كل شيء. اللهم أنت الأول فليس قبلك شيء، وأنت الآخر فليس بعدك شيء، وأنت الظاهر فليس فوقك شيء، وأنت الباطن فليس دونك شيء. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد النبي الأمين المصطفى خاتم النبيين والهادي للبشرية أجمع، ونصلي على آله وأصحابه ومن اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We start in the name of God, the one and the only, the beginning and the end, the secret of all that is and that was and will be, the first and the last, the eternal and the immutable. The Prophet ﷺ would often repeat a dua that, like a lot of supplications repeated by the Prophets ﷺ, are a form of dhikr that cleanses the soul and affirms the being. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would often say, Allah, the Lord, God, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and the Lord of the throne, the Lord of all that is and that will be, I seek refuge in you, in everything, from everything that you ultimately are empowered against. You are the first and you are the last. There is nothing after you, as there was nothing before you. You are apparent. You are the Lord of all that appears. And you are the Lord of all that does not appear, all that is concealed from us. It is a form of dhikr. As you've heard me often say, that those who seek to understand what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was about, and those who seek to understand his message, can only do so by studying his legacy and his life in light of the legacy and the life of all the prophets of God through the ages. And that the key to understanding the prophets and understanding their legacy is to specifically study their supplications, their dhikr. Dhikr is what truly distinguishes a person that walks the path with God al-Rabbaniyun, those who look around them and look at the affairs of this world and are reach a point of being tiresome and I don't want to use something like it sounds like an exaggeration, but that are unfulfilled by the material and the physical, and are convinced that there must be more. That there must be more either before but the beginning of time, or that there must be more at their time, or that they must be more after their time. Which is very, of course, logical, because our consciousness is like a simple flicker in the span of time. It's like a little flicker, literally, like the flicker that you see in an insect that flies around for a very short period and then disappears from existence. Our consciousness is so limited, but that consciousness is such a gift because it is the opportunity to absorb so much. To be dissatisfied with that moment of consciousness is the call of God within us. That restlessness, that sense of unsettlement, that sense of, after you've walked the path, you've had your love stories, you've had your hate stories, you've had your ambition stories, you had your disappointment stories, you had your aspirations for friendship and kinship, and you've ultimately had your betrayals and disappointments. Beyond all of that, after all of that, you look at the essence of the truth. And the essence of the truth is precisely what dhikr, what the supplications rekindle in our heart. If every moment and every time we responded to a sense of insecurity, or a sense of boredom, or a sense of fear, or even to a sense of exuberance, or over-ambition, or a moment of exaggerated self, because we often, in the same way we exaggerate demeaning ourselves at moments of disappointment and loss, we also exaggerate ourselves at moments of happiness and joy. If at every moment like that we rekindle the remembrance, a great power would be within us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in a powerful way that demands our attention. And I'm going to speak in a second, especially the way it applies to Muslims. But addressing humanity at large, when Allah says, the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Ra, كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور. Or when Allah reminds us, يا أيها الناس قد جاءكم برهان من ربكم وأنزلنا إليكم نورا مبينا. Repeatedly, God addresses human beings, saying, in this book, referring to the Quran, كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور. We've sent you a book. We've sent you the word so that you can bring people from darkness to light. In the same vein, we are often reminded, invoking that same theme, Allah has sent you a guide, a reliable, constant, stable guide. A guide that addresses your heart, and a guide that addresses your intellect, and a guide that does not require that your intellect and your heart be at war, and does not require that your soul be divided or at odds with your intellectual ability. That guide is a light, the light of certitude. How many times did the Quran remind you that God is the path of light, that God is the light upon light? And the nature of darkness itself is that when light is present, darkness retracts. No matter what darkness does, if the light is present, darkness can only withdraw. Darkness does not overcome light, but light overcomes darkness by the nature of things. The key, though, is whether you keep that light inside of you. When so many Muslims and so many believers, their light, their inner light, has worn itself out and has dwindled to the point of becoming extinguished. But they don't realize that. And they could live a lifetime not realizing that their light has gone out. The only way to truly search for that light is to look in a mirror. No one can tell you whether your light, that light, is still within you or not. The only one that knows is God. But if you look in a mirror, and you look in an honest mirror, some people, and I hear this often, say, well, my light is covered by folds of sin or darkness. It's not true. Darkness will not cover light. If the light is in there, it will chart, it will cut its path through the darkness, and it will appear. It might be that you need a stronger light, a brighter light. You need the light to overcome you. But darkness, by its nature, is weaker than light. It doesn't overtake light. You just step in a dark room and turn on a flashlight. And I mean, the laws of physics, the laws of energy is like that. It is dhikr. It is dhikr where you and God, you and the one who blew in you the breath of life, the one who made the decision for your existence, the one who intended for your existence to be a gift. Now, the gifter can have an intent. How you receive that gift is something completely different. The intent of the giver remains the same whether the recipient of the gift accepts it or rejects it, celebrates it or hates it. But it was intended as a gift, with a promise that if you take this gift as a gift, I will grow within you and you will grow within me. If you take this gift and accept it as a gift, you are on your way to becoming a Rabbani, to becoming a godly human being. Becoming a human being who can peel away the various layers that alienates you from your true maker, your only maker, that alienates you from the intentionality of the maker who willed that you exist in the first place, who decided when you will be born and where you will be born and to which parents you will be born and at what time and what place. Hubris can often lead us to philosophizing why we exist in one period and not another, in one place or not another, in one ethnic group or not another, in one social group but not another, in one genealogical tree but not another. But it's all hubris. The only true knowledge that could come to you as to precisely your place within God's intentionality can only come from God. Can only come from God. So many younger people especially say, I'm not sure why I was created, I'm not sure what my purpose is. It's not that older people know why they were created. Most older people just get tired of wondering about this and they never obtain a question, they obtain an answer, so they just stop asking it. They just get bored with hearing themselves asking it. But the truth is that that type of knowledge, that type of certitude, and being at peace with your consciousness, with your existence, with your place within history, can only come from the one who formed the intentionality in the first place, and that's your maker. And that can only come from a close, intimate friendship with your maker. If you are not in the habit of listening to God, don't complain that you don't have godly answers. If you're not in the habit of listening to God, don't complain that you don't have godly answers. So many people speak with a sense of near outrage or a sense of injury, sense of being offended. I don't have answers. I don't have answers. I don't have answers for why I'm here, or what am I doing, or why I was born the way I was born, etc., etc. There's a huge difference between listening to family, listening to your friends, listening to your tradition, listening to your tribe, listening to your center or mosque, and listening to God. That comes only through the tool of dhikr, supplications, remembrance of God. One of the companions, radiallahu anhu, asked the Prophet ﷺ, tell me, what is the best way for me to draw closer to God? The Prophet ﷺ answered, dhikr, supplications. The man said, okay, what is the best worship? What is the best way that I can worship God? And the Prophet ﷺ said, dhikr, supplication. The man paused and said, okay, so what is the best prayer? And the Prophet said, dhikr. Okay, so what is the best sawm? Fasting. Prophet answered, dhikr. Then what is the best zakah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, dhikr. The narrative goes on where the man says, so is it all about dhikr? And the answer is yes. It is. Our prayer, the 5 daily prayers, is not a gymnastic exercise, although for many Muslims it becomes a gymnastic exercise. And it is not about communion with the energies on the face of the earth. And it is not about simply the law. It is, as our scholars of old said, like knocking at the door of the Lord, saying, I am once again here in your presence. You know, one of my teachers used to say, he had met Anwar al-Sadat, the ex-president, the former president of Egypt, and he was saying, you know, when I met Sadat, they made an appointment for me 6 months ahead. They told me precisely where I'm going to meet him, from what time to what time. They went over with me what the protocol and the etiquette is in meeting him from beginning till the end of the meeting. They told me, they rehearsed with me what questions may be asked, what questions may not be asked. They told me what topics could be broached, what topics cannot be broached. And I never forget this. He later on repeated it in one of his sermons, but then he smiled and he said, you know, I never appreciated how humble it is for Allah to receive us 5 times a day until I met with Sadat. Because at any time I like, all I have to do to knock at the Lord's door is say Allahu Akbar, and I've got the Lord's attention. And I keep the Lord's attention as long as I want. The Lord never turns me away. If I want it for 2 minutes, I get 2 minutes. If I want it for 10 hours, I get 10 hours. All you do is you say Allahu Akbar and you're there in the full presence of the Lord, and you've got the Lord's full attention. one can never separate Iman, faith, from the reality of what that faith is designed to bring into your life. Remember that it is a fundamental tenet of Islam and a tenet of, as far as Muslims are concerned, all the Abrahamic religions, that Allah time and time remind Muslims, and by Muslims I mean all the prophets, from Ibrahim to Musa to Isa and to all the way to Muhammad alayhi salam. Peace be on all of them. That Allah, God, is self-sufficient and immutable. God gains nothing from our practices. The gift of light, which is the gift of the divine, because the divine is the light of the heavens and the earth, is to partake in divinity, to see the divinity within. And no amount of law and no amount of instruction and no amount of dogma can make you find that light within unless you look deeply in a mirror. And the very objective of Iman is to allow you not just to find that light, but fully embrace that light until it chases away the corners of darkness within us, within each of us. The more you reach out to the light, meaning God, the light upon light, the more God re-energizes and empowers that light within us. The more you reach out either to nothing or to false gods, and there are so many false gods, including nations, tribes, organizations, so on and so forth. Eventually that light quivers and dims until it becomes so small that it takes a tremendous amount of effort to reignite it and find it. The more Muslims, the more the world experiences the tragedies and inequities and injustices that it experiences, the more we see deep and fundamental imbalances and tragedies in this world. The wise person would seek to be as filled with the light of the Maker, the light of God, as they possibly can. The person who's not wise would say, there is so much darkness around, might as well let the light go out in me as well. And then all is lost. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu waliyyu alladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur والذين كفروا أولياؤهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات. A solemn promise from Allah, a solemn promise from God, that if you seek the path of light, God will hold your hands to take you out of the darkness into the light. But it is the second part of this ayah, of this verse, that has always given me an enormous amount of pause and has often been in my mind as I read through the history of humanity, the rise and fall of justice societies, the nature of tyranny and exploitation, the nature of racism and ethnocentrism and sexism, the way that human beings dominate and exploit other human beings, the way that human beings make other human beings suffer. The nature of Allah's light, God's light, is that when it shines within, your senses, your desires, longs for the beloved. You long and you understand this near philosophical understanding descends upon you, so that you see everything for what it is, and your heart is emptied from greed, jealousy, competition, pettiness, hate. As the Quran describes Ibad al-Rahman, يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا, the way they tread upon the earth is with, they're alight with light. They're alight with light. That when they tread, often people haven't reflected, why does it say softly tread upon the earth? Softly, because your heart is so full with the divine that the earth nearly doesn't feel your impact on it. You don't stomp on the earth demanding that it submits to you, because you and the earth submit to God. The ethics of those who become full with God's light, by the very nature of that light, is the rejection of what the Quran calls taghut. Taghut is an old word. It's a word that has its origins in Aramaic and then Syriac. All forms of injustice and inequity. Remember that if you are talking about the Quran itself, it reminds us that there is no religion without a measure of light. So that Allah reminds us that Moses was sent with books that had light within them. And Jesus sent with books that had light within them. A measure. But what the truth of light, the test of what light is that it draws you to beauty. It draws you to all that is beautiful, all that is just and merciful and compassionate. If you claim that you have light within, but you wear blinders to injustice and oppression, then what I suggest to you is what you've acquired is a type of dependency and drug addiction that gives you comfort at the expense of others, not God's divine guidance. God's divine guidance makes you averse to everything that is ungodly. And everything that is ungodly, you want to call it the demonic, the satanic, is everything that is represented in the images of suffering, powerlessness, oppression, harm, tyranny. I'll give you one final example. You read throughout, recently, if you haven't been keeping up with National Geographic came out with an article about the excavations that the Israeli authorities are doing under the Aqsa Mosque. The Aqsa Mosque, the article in National Geographic notes several times that all it takes is a minor accident and major parts of the Aqsa Mosque will crumble. And that the excavations that the Israeli authorities have been doing would not be possible without confiscating and tearing down Palestinian buildings and homes that have been there in certain families for centuries. And that after Israel confiscates and destroys these lands or annexes this territory, often allowing Jewish settlers to move in if they're not going to use it for excavations, the part that immediately captured my attention is reading the literature about Israeli religious archaeology in this region. Of course, those who know the state of the Muslim world know that the level of hegemony of the West over the Muslim world had reached a point that when an Egyptian raises a Palestinian flag in a soccer game, he is arrested and charged and is right now in prison and will probably face a criminal sentence for simply raising the Palestinian flag in a soccer game. You could raise a Palestinian flag anywhere in the United States and you will not be charged and sentenced. But that's the level of hegemony that the West has over the Muslim world today. Going back to Jerusalem, the part that caught my attention is that I started reading what various commentators, especially the theologians that I like reading, and I'm not talking about Muslim theologians, I'm talking about Jewish and Christian theologians, who are talking about Israel's role in Jerusalem. And time and again, people who I have a great deal of respect for intellectually fail when it comes to the test of light. Why do they fail when it comes to the test of light? They can talk about all types of ethical issues related to God and God's justice, but they never notice the suffering of the Palestinians. They don't exist. They are so embedded in their imperial project that with a straight face, a preacher can stand there and talk about God's kingdom and Jesus, the Lord of the kingdoms, and talk about rules Israel in this futuristic plan, but not once notice the plight of the displaced, the refugees, those who are direct victims of the injustice that aggressive theological ideas in the West, the victims who suffered because of these aggressive theological ideas over the past centuries. You cannot have God's light in you if you don't notice the suffering of those who suffer. Those who claim to have the light in them and do not notice the suffering of African Americans and what it means to be an African American living in an inner city like Philadelphia or New York or Houston or Dallas. What it means to be an African from Africa in today's world, with governments that exist to serve the interests of the World Bank and France and the Netherlands, but that grinds thousands and millions of dark-skinned people every year without conscience. To claim to have God's light in you, but not even be bothered by the great inequities that exist in the world today, and especially our support for despotism and mass human rights violations. As long as they're committed against dark-skinned people, we let it pass. If it's committed within people that look like us, suddenly we're troubled by it. That hypocrisy is a sure sign that the divine is not within. As Allah reminds us time and time again, God does not love the unjust, and God does not accept injustice. At-Taghut. Injustice and oppression are antithetical to the soul of Islam and the nature of the divine light. That is precisely why when you are drawn to the light, you are drawn to beauty in all its forms. And beauty in all its forms has the air of justice and equity. You don't just think of your own comfort or whether you feel that your needs have been met, but you are ignited by a divine light to think of the suffering of all others and to say, what is within me is that I exist to serve you. I exist to serve you. That is Islam. That has been Islam from the very beginning till today. Pray with me that Muslims remember that, because they need you. اللهم اعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا واهدنا لأقرب من هذا رشدا يا علي يا عظيم. Allah, forgive our sins, guide us to your straight path, allow us to be better Muslims in your sake, and to have the light within us grow until it is one with you. Allah ya Ali ya Azim wa salli wa sallim wa barik ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.